Hello again. Today we are talking about the Cold Steel Rajah III, and this is a knife that I am going to call accidentally brilliant. Why is it accidentally brilliant, right? Because this knife started with a bad idea, it went to another bad idea, and another bad idea, and somehow ended up as an actually really good knife. Okay, so the first bad idea was to make a knife in the shape of a Kukri and make it a folding knife. So Cold Steel made the original Rajah and the Rajah II, which is a great big long folding knife, but a Kukri is designed for chopping stuff. So they took a blade design that was meant for chopping, and then they put a folding knife in the middle of it so that it wasn't really that great for chopping anymore, right? And then what they did was they took a chopping knife with a folding mechanism in the middle, and then they made it smaller so that it wasn't good for chopping anymore, and that's where they got to the Rajah III, and yet somehow it actually manages to be a really good knife. So how on earth does it manage that? Well, first of all is the ergonomics. This knife is extremely comfortable. There's lots of smoothness on the handle. There's no real places where it can bite you or raise a hot spot. In my hand, this fits perfectly. In my wife's hand, this is too big to be comfortable. I also feel like if your hand was any wider than mine across the fingers here and didn't fit in here, it might not be comfortable. So there is probably a fairly narrow range of hand sizes that fit this. My hand just happens to fit in it very well. Across the back of the knife here, obviously it's a lockback, so you've got a full back of the spine. It's pretty wide, so there's no hot spots when you're cutting with it. Even the back of the blade here with that thumb disc is wider than the blade, so it makes it very, very comfortable to push cut with this, much more so than a normal blade, because there's more surface area to put your thumb on. When I did my extended cutting tests with this, I was blown away by how comfortable it was. So ergonomics on this are great. The newer versions that Cold Steel has, they've put more texturing on the handle, which means it offers fantastic grip. You can even choke up on it like a finger choil here, because there's plenty of room up here and no sharp edge right there at the bottom. So if you like that particular cutting hold, that works as well. Really like this. Another word on ergonomics is that this has a triad lock, which is normally a very stiff, kind of hard to open lock. On this knife, somehow it manages to be very smooth. You can see it kind of falls shut when I break the lock there. No issue at all with stiffness. It opens easily. Again, my hand size, it opens easily. My wife with slightly smaller hands really struggled to get that open. So hand size is important on this. Pocket clip initially on this knife was too tight. It's a steel pocket clip, it's easily bent, but that was an annoyance on there. No real sharp edges or anything on it, so it's not going to tear my pants or anything or injure me. And it does sit nice and flat to the handle, so it doesn't create a hot spot when you're cutting with it. So like the pocket clip, just a little stiff on the knife when it was very new. Lefties actually have a different pocket clip, as they do on some Cold Steel knives. Comes with the knife, so there's no issue there. One thing that is a little bit of a concern with this is the angle of the blade. Now, I like this forward angle of the blade, especially paired with that recurve, because it makes cutting into things really aggressive and it stays into what you're cutting rather than sliding out. But I wouldn't want this knife with anything other than a triad lock, which is a super sturdy, strong lock, because that forward angle, if you're stabbing into something this way, tends to want to deflect the blade forward into the closed position. So it's not the best stabbing knife unless you're kind of careful with it, but it is a fantastic, fantastic cutting knife. That tilt forward keeps my wrist locked. So where with a regular knife, I would have to kind of cock my wrist like this to get an aggressive angle on something. This knife is already there, so I can just leave my wrist in that locked position, which gives me a lot more power when I'm cutting with it, and it prevents my wrist and my hand from getting fatigued as I do my cutting tests. Weight on this knife, we're looking at 5.2 ounces, so it's on the heavier side of everyday carry. more of a work knife, kind of hard use knife. It is carryable, but that is a little on the heavier side on the weight. Here is a size comparison. There is a Benchmade Griptilian, so this is a long knife. It's a lot of handle though. So you can see there's more real estate to the cutting edge because it's curved than the Griptilian, but overall it doesn't take up that much more space lengthwise. The handle is quite a bit longer. Here is a SOCP folder. Again, that's a very long knife, so no surprise there. Here is a Spyderco Caribbean, which is kind of a large knife as well. Similar in size there. Microtech Ultratech, which is a lot thinner and skinnier of a knife. Here's a SOG Seal XR. This might actually be a worthy competitor for this knife. Heavier, burlier, doesn't hold as good of an edge. Here is a SOG Kiku XR LTE. That's a much smaller knife. Again, less edge on this one just overall. And then here is lastly a Benchmade Shootout. So that's kind of where that knife falls on the size scale there. So when you're talking about the steel, the edge on this held decently but not exceptionally. So this is AUS 10A steel, which is a significant upgrade from the AUS 8A that cold steel tends to make everything out of. 150 cuts, which is in line with kind of the lower end of S35VN, or like a 440C is just about identical to this. Better than AUS 8A, but not exceptional. Good for the price. This is a relatively inexpensive knife. The price on this knife in the last 10 years has actually dropped about 20 bucks. So this was less than a $50 knife. So for less than 50 bucks, that's actually a decent edge performance. Let's get into some disassembly here. There's my T10. Yes, that's a T10. So we'll get the pivot bolt, and then we'll go after the other bolts, which I believe are T6s. So one thing that I do appreciate about how they've constructed this knife is that this is a very overbuilt knife. You've got pivot bolt, you got 3 bolts down here, and you also have 2 external pins and I believe 1 internal pin that hold the whole thing together. So there is a lot holding this knife together, which is a good thing. It's a very sturdy knife. It's a lockback. It's really kind of loaded for bear here on the construction of the knife, which I appreciate. This is obviously designed to be a knife that you will use a lot. The one ergonomic issue that I have is that this inside of the front here where the blade goes in is a little on the sharp side. I didn't notice it in my cutting tests, but when I'm just opening and closing the knife, it is a little sharp on my hand. It's never going to cut you. But I will be sanding that down after I disassemble it. This has full metal liners. I believe they are aluminum. I tried sticking a magnet to them and it would not stick, so I don't think that they're stainless steel even. I think those are aluminum liners, like they are with some of the other cold steel large folders. There's my last bolt on this side. Let's see if that will come off of there. It will. Very good seam on the back there. You can barely even see that seam. You certainly can't feel it when the knife is in use, but it comes out without too much trouble. There's the plastic scale. Here is the aluminum liner. Yeah, it's definitely aluminum. So it comes off there. There is the washer. This is a bronze washer with a Teflon washer. So that's kind of interesting. You don't see that too often. There's that. Here's the triad lock mechanism. You can see recessed there. I'm not quite sure what the purpose of this pin is. It doesn't seem to function in the lock. I think that's just an extra sturdy pin to make the knife more durable. So kind of cool there. Let's pull the blade out. Teflon and bronze washer on the other side as well, which might be why this is so smooth. They haven't left a huge amount of blade tang here, but this is a very thick tang on this blade, so I don't think that there's any issue with durability there. One thing I did do, the one modification I have made to this knife is that you can see down here there was a relatively large unsharpened portion of blade above the ricasso. The actual sharpened portion of the blade started about here when I bought it. I sharpened that all the way down. I would want to do that if I were you, if I bought the knife as well. It functions okay without it. It was just a little bit annoying. So there is the blade. Here is the lock mechanism. Pretty tough spring on there. Let me see if I can get the spring out without taking out the back here. I'm not sure that I will be able to. Let's try to lever that up. From the inside there. So there is a fair amount of tension on there. This pin comes out easily. Pivot is actually wedged in there pretty good. There we go. Pivot comes out. And I think to get the spring off of this, I'm actually going to have to, oh, there I can go. I can get it this way. Got the lock bar popped off of there, and then the spring comes out. These bolts go into the other side. I'm not sure how well keyed they are. Okay, so they are keyed into that half of the spacer. There's the back spacer. These, like I said, are keyed, so they're not keyed. Never mind, they have a keyed look to them, but they don't actually, oh, they're keyed into the metal. So they're keyed into the metal of the liner so that they won't spin when you're putting in the bolts, which is kind of cool. There's the lock pin. There's the stop pin, which fits very tightly. Here is the pocket clip. So I'm going to take off the pocket clip because I want to take off the other liner so that you can see a full disassembly here. These are just going into aluminum, so if you do tighten this pocket clip, don't over tighten it. You'll probably strip it out if you do. Okay, there's the pocket clip, 3-bolt clip, which is a good thing because it's going into aluminum. Here's the other liner. There we go. And this particular knife is really has a press fit in there, and I don't want to bend that out, so I'm not going to take this one out of the liner. But you could if you really wanted to. That just happens to be extremely tightly fit on this one. So that is the Cold Steel Rajah III. I actually really like this knife. Because of the thickness of the blade and the overall sturdiness of the build and just how comfortable it is in the hand, this is an exceptional kind of everyday carry / hard use knife. I'm actually getting ready to do a renovation on a house. This knife is going to end up in my pocket a lot because it has that recurve blade that digs in and stays, holds a decent edge, and is going to be comfortable in my hand when I'm going to be using it for hours at a time coming up here. So hope you enjoyed the video. I actually like this knife. This is actually an inexpensive knife that I do like, as opposed to some of the more expensive knives that I've reviewed recently that I didn't like. So I hope you enjoyed it. Good piece of equipment. Like, subscribe, do all the YouTube stuff. Enjoy your adventures.